This is the Sixth Man Show, an Orlando Magic podcast, with your hosts, Luke Sylvia and Jonathan Osborne, covering all things Magic basketball. By fans, for fans. Go Magic! What's going on, Orlando Magic fans? You guys are back with the Sixth Man Show. Today is June 24th, 2024. Jonathan Osborne here, as always, joined by my co-host, Luke Sylvia. Luke, what is going on, man? It's already almost July.
Yeah, we were just talking about how crazy it is, how fast June is going by. And yeah, I mean, you look up and all of a sudden the draft is this week, and then a week from today, or as we record this, really 6 days from when you're listening to this, on Sunday, June 30th at 6 p.m., there's going to be free agent negotiations. Free agency is officially open for anybody and everybody. So it is crazy. I would love to fast forward, honestly, to Sunday, but we do have the draft first, and that might give us an inkling maybe of which way that we'll go in free agency. Might not tell too much, just because you got guys that are fighting for minutes, and now the Magic are hopefully a consistently top 5 team in the East. That there's not many minutes to go around at this point. So we'll see how they handle the draft. Maybe we get a little trade action. That would make the draft a lot of fun. Obviously, when you're picking at 18, it's just kind of like trying to see, okay, which way you want to go. Are you going to obviously just best fit? Do you go for the older prospect so that he can slide into the lineup and get minutes right away? Do you go for the younger player because you do have so many guys and you just hope that in 2 to 3 years that player's ready to go after playing in the G League, a la Jet Howard in his rookie year? So there's a lot of ways that this can go on draft night on Wednesday, and I'm very interested just to see how it goes. If we keep the pick, if we pick, how we pick, strategically, all that kind of stuff.
ESPN, they updated their way too early NBA power rankings for next season. If obviously they finalized that after the Celtics completed their championship run, and the Magic 11th in the way too early power ranking. So getting a little bit of respect around the league as we talk about the draft. Draft is coming up here as you're listening to this in 2 days on the 26th. Going to be the first round, and the 27th is the second round. Remember, they're breaking up the first and second round this year on the broadcast. But we're going to be talking a bit more about the draft and some of the prospects in just a few minutes. But there is some unfortunate, relevant free agency news. If you root for the Magic or have been paying attention to what the Magic may or may not do this year in NBA free agency, first of all, just want to mention again, I know we talked about this on the last episode, but the day following the finals, almost a week now, teams have been able to negotiate with their own free agents, and across the league, there's been almost no noise in terms of player specific stuff. We've got the Pascal Siakam extension in Indiana. Drew Eubanks turned down his player option with the Phoenix Suns, so he's going to be a free agent. And then Malik Monk of the Sacramento Kings intends to sign a 4-year, $78 million deal to stay with the Kings, per ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski. Malik Monk, for a lot of Magic fans, was number one. I think for me, definitely was number one in terms of free agent targets this offseason. And before we even get to free agency, before we can even talk to Malik Monk, he's already decided to stay in Sacramento.
Definitely a gut punch, because like you said, he was on everybody's wish list, and as he should have been. The news breaks, and I think it's so funny just to see people react, because I can tell that they haven't taken any time to think about it. And they're like, oh, 19 million, what are they doing? The Magic could have given him so much more. And I was like, oh, that's the point. He didn't care. It's not really about the money. He loves Sacramento, and I can respect that. As much as it sucks to be, to be in that position as a fan of the Magic, because we wanted Malik Monk so badly. It's good for the Kings, because that's the situation that we want the Magic to be in with a lot of these guys for years to come, is they get down to it and they will take a price cut, whatever. Because Malik Monk had to have known that he could have gotten more than 19 a year on another roster, whether it be the Magic or whoever. It had to have been known, and clearly he didn't care, and he just wanted to stick with them. And that type of loyalty is something that I hope that our entire foundation of Magic players has, someday, if not already. But yeah, sucks, but in perspective and in hindsight, it makes sense.
Yeah, it's endearing. Are you happy for Malik Monk? Screw him. That's what I say. I say screw him. Okay. We could have won a title, Malik. We could have won a title here, but nah, all jokes aside. I mean, it sucks. It sucks for us, but good for him, I guess.
It is super interesting. Like the part that is interesting to me is like that's such a tough conference. They won 46 games. They went 46-36, end up being the 9 seed in the West, and it's like that's how maybe I don't know. Maybe near the end of his career he won't even be a ring chaser, because a dude that's that loyal, like values the situation and the chemistry he has and whatever. I don't know his family situation. Maybe he's got a family out there in Sacramento and that, they've grown up and whatever. So who knows? But it is the one part that does get me soured a little bit is the fact that like the Kings they're good, but the West is so great that I fear that Malik Monk is not really going to experience a lot of success in Sacramento on a team level. Personally, I think he's a great player and he'll continue to be, a 6 man of the year guy and all that kind of stuff, but it is unfortunate.
The good thing for Sacramento is, regardless of what they decide to do, like, sure, are they a team that may be near their ceiling? You could argue that, but being able to hold on to the asset, that's going to be a very tradable contract, for Malik Monk, if they decide to go in a different direction. And somebody tweeted, like, if Malik Monk got 20, like Klay might not even get 15.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about Klay Thompson. I know we spent a good length of time talking about Klay and Magic's potential to sign him this offseason on the last episode, but we did get a new sort of tidbit of news from Jake Fisher on a podcast saying that Orlando is really only willing to offer Klay the 2-year like balloon payment, like the 2-year max for Klay. Similar to what they did with Joe Ingles, you offer this guy more money than he's going to get anywhere else, and he agrees to come and play for a couple of years. Now, the Klay Thompson balloon payment will be much higher than 2 years, $22 million or whatever it was with Joe, but makes me feel it might not even be true. As we know, this front office doesn't really let anything leak. But just hearing that makes me feel a little bit better that if we do bring in Klay, it's not going to be for this 3-4 year sort of max, which I know a lot of Magic fans are a little bit weary of.
Well, yeah. What the truth is, like, when it comes to what we know this front office to do and that they don't leak things, Jake Fisher's hearing this obviously somewhere and made that pretty clear when I talked with him on our show, however long ago that was. Was that last year or earlier this year? I don't remember. But just made it clear of like he's hearing things from there's multiple points, because that's part of the reporting process. If you are a good, credible reporter like Jake Fisher has rapidly become in the last couple of years, it's because you have kind of a checks and balances. You have I need to hear it from this amount of people or this credible of a source in order for me to even put it out there. So I believe that it's at least pretty true that the Magic were, and it makes sense. Like, it's also not one of those things where I hear it, I'm like, oh, there's no shot. But it makes sense that the Magic only want to do the 2 years. But given Klay's situation, the injury history, maybe character concerns, and also the age, right? So it all lines up. It all makes sense. And honestly, when you hear that, it's like, oh, I don't think we have a shot anymore. Because I think there's going to be other teams that are maybe willing to give him a 3-year deal just to satisfy him and get him there. I don't think he takes any less than 3 years. If he does, it'll probably be with Golden State so that he can reevaluate at the next, time that it is time for him to be a free agent. So, not really unfortunate, but the exhilaration that Klay Thompson and Magic pinstripes could bring somebody feels like it got squashed with that Jake Fisher report the other day, and the writing seems on the wall.
For me, missing out on Malik Monk changes my feeling on Klay just a little bit. But if I just fast forward a week into the future, I'm like, hey, we got Klay. Like, knowing what you know now,
right?
I don't give you any other context. I just tell you, hey, we got Klay. What are your thoughts? Because mine is we are so freaking back. Like, the juice is back in Orlando. If you end up getting Klay on a 2-year balloon payment and he declines, going back to Golden State on a discount or, some of these other options, like, that means like he realizes this is a legitimate spot and we are back.
Yeah. 2 years, it's so inconsequential. It's so inconsequential. You've got money to play with anyway. And the Magic are not going to win the championship in the next 2 seasons. And I think that if anything, like Klay's, just him being a vet and also his spacing, obviously being one of the greatest 3-point shooters of all time, even out of injury and whatever, the crazy number, what was it, 40% on 9 attempts this year? Even just that, and just slight defensive capabilities for him would be awesome. So especially for a 2-year deal, and it's like, and then if it's a 1+1 with a team option, or if it's just straight 2 years, that's something you walk away from feeling very good about, because you're like, we get to experiment with this. This is a lot of fun. The Magic just became a more fun team because you added a big name like Klay Thompson, regardless of the point he's at in his career. So we'll see what happens with Klay. That is going to be interesting, and I am going to be so irritated if it's drawn out over the summer. I hope that it's bang bang and it happens quickly, and he already kind of knows what he wants to do. But I have a feeling that it could be a little bit of time.
Last thing that I want to say here, I know how certain people feel about Bill Simmons. I know how I feel a lot of the times about Bill Simmons. But when it comes to his conversations around like the big picture piece of the NBA, I still find him very entertaining. I listened to his pod this week, not the one that he did with his dad after they won the title, but the other one that he did with Chris Ryan and someone else, obviously talking about just the Celtics championship run and so on and so forth. They got into some of the other questions around the league. And the thing with Klay, it's like, what is Golden State's option, right? They either let him walk, and now you don't have this Steph, Draymond, Klay core anymore. Now you're moving sort of into the next direction, and certain people are going to feel a certain type of way about that. Or they re-sign him for what he wants. They can't win because of their cap situation, and it just gets super awkward there. So it's really going to be, regardless of what happens with the Magic, that's going to be such an interesting storyline to watch this summer. And now for our feature presentation, shout out to our guy, Dan Savage, over at OrlandoMagic.com. This past Thursday, he put out a piece of just sort of like compiling all of the mock drafts across national media, and went through and just broke down like which each outlet, like what player they think the Magic could end up with in this Wednesday's draft. We thought it would be fun to sort of go through that list, break it down a little bit, see which players were mocked the most to the Magic, and then just give our 2 cents on the player, whether or not we'd like the Magic to draft them, if they're available, how they might fit here, and sort of what it means for the rest of the team. So I'm going to start here with the player that was mocked to the Magic the most. He was mocked 3 out of, I think it was 14 different mock drafts, I believe. But he was mocked by Bleacher Report, The Ringer, and SB Nation to the Magic at 18. Duke's Jared McCain, the guard out of Duke, 6'2", 203 pounds, 6'3.5" wingspan, shot 46% from the floor this year, 41% from behind the arc, 88% at the free throw line, 61% at the rim, averaged 14.3 points per game, 5 rebounds, 1.9 assists. Luke, what are your thoughts on Jared McCain?
Jared McCain is interesting because if you just look at the numbers, which is what a lot of people are going to do, they're going to look at highlights, obviously, but those are highlights. We're not sitting here watching full games of these guys. and at least I'm not. And so you're looking at highlights. It's everything. It makes him look good on every aspect. So if you're just looking at highlights and you're just looking at numbers, honestly, I look at Jared McCain and I'm like, how is this dude not going higher than 18? Like, it just doesn't add up. And that's someone who really didn't watch a ton of Duke this past year during the college season at all. I think I maybe caught them a couple times on television, and it's not like I was locked in evaluating prospects because, let's be honest, my team is good. So I didn't need to. So Jared McCain, though, like, obviously what jumps out to me is almost 6 threes a game, 41.5% essentially, and 14 points, 5 rebounds, almost 2 assists, 1.3 turnovers a game. But and he's 6'3" as a guard. Like, there, I think Jared McCain is a great player. I think he is going to be a really solid player. I could see him being a long-term rotational piece for teams, just with his ability to knock down the 3-ball, honestly. So for me, that's where I'm at with Jared McCain. There's not a whole lot of profound analysis coming from my direction, but my big takeaway is I'm really surprised that he's mocked to the Magic so much, and at 18 to fall that far.
I agree with that, and because of that reason, I just don't see him being available there at 18. Now, maybe I'm not as familiar with other prospects sort of up and down this draft board. We're really just going into these mock drafts here. But from what I could see from Jared, I'm really seeing a lot of the same things. Yes, he's a little bit undersized at 6'2", still has a positive wingspan, though. Like you said, almost 6 attempts per game, shot 41% from behind the arc, shot 56% on transition threes. And that was notable to me because for a team in the Magic who are young and do have the ability to get out and run, you would expect their transition offense to be a little bit better, and it wasn't. It was towards the bottom half of the league. He does have some ability to attack closeouts, just given like his proficiency shooting from behind the arc. Teams close out hard on him, but he is good at attacking those, getting to the rim. Again, finished 61% of his attempts at the rim this year. Does have the ability to be a solid team defender, but because of his, he's not an elite athlete and he doesn't have a lot of physical like gifts, just given his size. He's not going to be this great like on-ball defender, but I think he could be solid as a team defender. Is a little bit limited as a creator and just struggles guarding the ball overall. So for me, and I guess my next question, Luke, is like, if we were to draft Jared McCain, what do you think? How does that impact the Magic at all? And what do you think his role would be this year?
Well, if you just look at like the excerpt that Dan Savage puts in here from Jonathan Wasserman about who basically did this write up for Jared McCain. Just said, like, shot making has and always will be what powers his offense and value. McCain's effectiveness this year in ball situations, using change of speed, footwork, crafty finishing, and vision, point to more on-ball upside with his creativity and feel. And that's something like, I hear that, and as a Magic fan who would love a point guard to do that and be able to shoot the long ball, that seems like a match made in heaven, right? But obviously that comes with the caveat of, if he could be that polished player this year, then that would be awesome. But the truth is he was one and done at Duke, and he's young, and we'll see what happens with him. But I it's hard because if you draft him, I just wonder if that just makes me wonder if you're either going to keep him in the G League for a year or two, or does that mean that you're not going to go after or prioritize a point guard in free agency like a Tyus Jones or whoever else, or bring back Fultz or let Anthony Black handle the reins? I think it would be kind of disrespectful to Anthony Black, if I'm being honest. It's like that. It seems like that's his role. Like that is the point guard role is going to be what Anthony Black is doing in 2 to 3 years if everything pans out when it comes to who is the point guard of this team. And if you were to bring in kind of a filler point guard in free agency, it's like maybe that point guard is on this team, or the starting point guard on this team till Anthony Black's ready to go in like 2 seasons to be that starting point guard. But if you bring in a guy that can do those things, like can play make and finish, you just have to believe that he's better than Anthony Black already, in my opinion. And that's really where I'm at. And that's the logic of this entire draft. It's like, okay, who are you bringing in, and who is this a slap in the face to that you've already got on the team to make them think that, oh, maybe I'm not in the future plans of the Magic.
So I see it differently. I don't see McCain as a point guard. I see him as an off guard. And let's say the Magic do go out. Now Malik Monk is off the table, but let's say they go out and get Klay Thompson and you sign him at this 2-year balloon deal, just in a hypothetical. My assumption would be your starting lineup would be Jalen Suggs, Klay Thompson, Franz Wagner, Paolo Banchero, Wendell Carter Jr. And in this scenario where you move on from Gary, you move on from Markelle Fultz, Anthony Black is your backup point guard, and then you're there with Cole Anthony, and then you could just sort of fill out the rest of that bench lineup with obviously Jonathan Isaac, Mo Wagner, and whoever else. I don't know if it's Joe Ingles, if it's Jet Howard, whoever that might be, sort of that 3/wing spot off the bench. To me, you draft Jared McCain if you want to restart the Cole Anthony timeline. To me, looking at our roster, that is the guy that I think he's closest to. There's a lot of things that they do similarly. Both solid rebounders. Jared McCain probably a better shooter. Cole Anthony's the better creator, the better passer. Both are probably going to be somewhat similar defensively, just given their size. If you want to move on from Cole Anthony, if you want to swap out for some of the things that he does well, to be able to add more shooting because he's not going to have the ball as much with Anthony Black in that backcourt, then it makes sense. To me, I would still continue on with Cole Anthony if that's the decision that you have to make. And I'm just trying to think of this logically. If the plan isn't to just draft a guy and stash him in the G League again, and this guy is potentially going to be in the lineup eventually, maybe you're grooming him to be like the Cole Anthony replacement if you feel like Cole is what he is and you've gotten what you can get out of him. I don't really know. But I don't see it as like a slight to Anthony Black if they were able to make that trade. Overall, I do think like the odds of us drafting a rookie and them being in the rotation this year are pretty slim.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's a good perspective.
Next, let's talk about Johnny Furphy, who was mocked by two separate outlets, CBS Sports and ESPN. So Johnny Furphy, the Aussie, 6'8", 189 pounds, 6'8" wingspan, 19-year-old wing out of Kansas. So again, Aussie, great touch, shot 80% at the rim. Good shooting stroke, right? Shot 35.2% from behind the arc on 3.8 attempts per game. Really effective as a cutter, but is a complete cone defensively. Like was targeted over and over again defensively in his matchups at Kansas. Luke, when I look at this guy and I see the shooting stroke, I'm like, man, this guy he just looks like a bucket. And then when I look at the numbers, reminds me of Caleb Houston, right? You go back and you look at Caleb's numbers from Michigan. Caleb was more effective on more volume from behind the arc. So when you look at Johnny Furphy, you're like, yeah, this guy really should be able to be a pretty good shooter, but it's more of that type of like, oh, this guy is a shooter in theory, because you look at his free throw percent, 76.5% from the charity stripe, but the touch, 80% at the rim, like attacking closeouts in transition. To me, that's where he's really most impressive. But I have to be absolutely sold that this kid is going to be an elite shooter, and he's going to be passable defensively if I'm going to bring him on.
When it comes to him, I believe Keandre of Hoop Intellect mentioned him in his conversation with yourself and Kevin, and immediately I went and looked at the stats, looked at the tape. I don't want him. I tell transparently, I don't want him. Like you said, kind of a Caleb Houston feel, but Caleb Houston even maybe higher upside even at this point of what we know about Caleb Houston. Who knows really? But I'm not at a point where I look at him and I'm like, oh yeah, I would love him on my team. Defensively, like if you're a cone defensively, I don't think at this point when the identity is so established in Orlando as a raw prospect at that young of an age, it's like there's no way that you're given a shot by this front office if I'm being honest.
And listen, I don't think Johnny Furphy has like a lower upside than Caleb Houston just because of like the finishing and the touch around the rim.
Right.
But if your selling point to me is higher upside than Caleb Houston, I'm out. Right. Like if that's your main argument for Johnny Furphy is, well, he could be better than Caleb Houston. I'm like, I've heard everything that I need to hear. Full stop. Like you just really have to buy in with the shooting with Johnny Furphy. And he did shoot the ball a little bit better, and once he started, I think like January for Kansas. But looking at 4 attempts per game, 35% from behind the arc, the shooting, stroke looks really solid. If I had to bet, I would probably bet that the shooting would pan out. But I just don't know if I'd be willing to make that investment with Johnny Furphy at 18 there. Let's go ahead and take a quick break. Give a special shout out to our patrons, the folks that help financially support each and every episode. We just put out our patron survey to sort of get feedback from all of our patrons to see what they do value, what they don't value, what they want to see more of, what they want to see less of. So we appreciate the support, and we also appreciate the feedback, right? Like our patrons are literally our biggest supporters. Those are the folks that are listening and watching to each and every episode. If you are one of our patrons already, in our Patreon page, we posted the link to that survey. If you go ahead and fill that out, again, we really, really appreciate your support and your feedback. It means everything to us. And then we have other benefits like our Discord community where, if you join at like our $5 tier and up, you get access to our Discord community, which I think has like 70 to 80 Magic fans that are talking Magic basketball all day, every day, year round, 365 days a year. Right now we give a special shout out to our Hall of Fame and Elite tier patrons each and every episode. So let me go ahead and start by shouting out Court Cousins, Drew Gooden, Armin, Carson Tulo, Ellis, Jonathan Borges, Normal Magic Player History, Gabe Gaines, Wiffle, Michael Martin, Jamel Miller, Michael Salapong, Donkey Punch Dave, Paolo and Francis Warren, Pierre A, Dylan Holden, Mr. Mikey, Danmo, Bobby Skinner, Goody 93, Teddy Sylvia, Dalek Lopez, Fuchsia, Bill Fulton, Edmund Lagone, Jose Esquilin, Caleb Pete, Cannibalism, Time, Mr. TV, ESPN Really Sucks, Gear 95 Shred, Junior Bruce, Half Freakin, Shahin 177, Bulby the Don, Himlo Ben Himro, R Improv 221, Ray Pastrana, Magic Kid 714, Mysterious Mosley, Irish Magic Mike, Austin Lampy, Random Hustle, Only Franz, Maria, Keith Walsh, Fritz, Bruv Sal, Casey Green, Santi Leon, Kane Eckler, The Distract, Ahmad Simpson, Chantu, Tom Gatson, Dead Air, Richard Tuttle, Jeremiah Quintero, Magic Wired, Debo 1980, Magic Matt, Michael Thompson, Mama Richmond, Next Snappa, What's Up Playoffs 2024, Dylan Fay, David Duffy, Smith Sheeks, Bueno Time, Stantino, 1995, Suggs Muggs, Daniel Anderson, Barry McElcaney, and Will Spivey. Again, if you want to find our Patreon, head over to patreon.com/The6Man-Show. Luke, next guy that I want to talk about, Isaiah Collier. Mocked to the Magic twice from ESPN and Yahoo Sports. 6'3", 205-pound guard out of USC, 19 years old, 6'5" wingspan. And the thing about Isaiah Collier is at one point was the number 1 rated prospect in this draft class, or his high school class, rather. Fantastic driving to the rim, 61% finishing at the rim, great speed, able to push the ball in transition, a lot of upside as a passer. But Luke, I feel like every time we've gone through and done like these prospect reviews, especially when it comes to guards, issues with turnovers, shot selection, that kind of thing. Now, the big sticking point with me for Isaiah Collier is that he does need to improve from behind the arc, 3 attempts per game, under 34% from behind the arc. And there are like legitimate defensive questions, just like in terms of his overall, focus on that end. What were your thoughts on Isaiah Collier?
Because of his obviously high assists all the time, are you thinking of him and as he being regarded as pretty strictly point guard use? Is that what you have seen too?
This would be disrespectful to Anthony Black.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. This is a prospect that doesn't make a whole ton of sense to me. This is if you don't believe in Anthony Black, right? This is actually the case, right? Because I agree with you on your earlier point about with Jared McCain and all.
It isn't as good as Anthony Black. Not even close.
Yeah. I do like that he has over 4 assists a game in college, which is like pretty good. But then, like you said, turnover prone. A lot of these young guys are, but over 3, like almost 3.5. I understand he's got decently high assists per game at the college level, but that does show a little bit of red flag there on that end for him. So yeah, there's not much to add about Isaiah Collier. Right? This is a guy that I look at and I just stop looking at pretty immediately because it's like he might be good for another team, but I just don't see him being a fit in Orlando.
Yeah, just some further context. 16.3 points per game, 2.9 rebounds, 4.3 assists per game. You mentioned the 3.3 turnovers, a steal and a half per game. Had the ball a ton, 30% usage rate. A lot of pressure on Isaiah Collier trying to make Bronny James look good over there at USC. I'm absolutely joking about that. But yeah, this is a prospect that I just don't think makes a ton of sense for the Magic. Not that I think that he's a bad prospect by any means. I just don't really see the fit given where the Magic are right now with the point guard situation and the fact that he's not fantastic defensively, not really a great shooter, doesn't really seem to fill a need right now. And I don't see, like, if this was an upside pick and you're going to like stash him or try to develop him, I think I would understand that. Like if we're talking about them drafting Jared McCain because they see the upside and they want to develop him, I get it, right? Fits a lot of what the Magic want and what they're trying to do. The Isaiah Collier pick, I really just don't see. The only thing that makes sense is the Magic do have a history of drafting guys who are at one point were towards the top of their high school classes. Look at Cole Anthony, look at Caleb Houston. They have a history of doing that. So even if people aren't mocking those guys a ton to the team, but I agree with you. I just don't really see the fit a ton with Isaiah Collier. Now, the next guy here, again, the only other guy that was mocked by multiple outlets, everybody else from here on out was just mocked once. This guy was mocked by Hoops Hype and USA Today. Tristan da Silva. This is a name that over the course of the last couple of months I've seen circulating, around Magic Twitter a lot. The 6'8", 217-pound wing, 23 years old, out of Colorado, 6 foot 10-inch wingspan. This dude is a shooter, 100%. This dude is a shooter, 39.5% from three on almost 5 attempts per game. Also finished 63.5% of his attempts at the rim. Shot 49% from the floor overall, 83.5% from the free throw line. In his senior season, averaged 16 points per game, 5.1 rebounds, 2.4 assists per game, and just over 1 steal. Fantastic cutter. 69% of his field goal percentage on cuts. Scored 1.3 points per possession on cuts. So like really a high level cutter. Solid passer, capable team defender. Brother of German national team teammate Oscar da Silva of Franz Wagner and Mo Wagner. So those guys probably have somewhat level of familiarity with Tristan da Silva. There's been a lot of talk about Franz. I do see it a little bit in his movement to the rim. Seems to be a better shooter than Franz. If this past season with Franz is any type of evidence, but I don't think he is the same type of finisher at the rim. Yes, he had a high percentage of those finishes at the rim, but I just didn't really see the same level of like footwork and craftiness and touch that we saw out of Franz Wagner this year. But capable team defender, a guy who projects as a really high level shooter as well. So I certainly understand the allure for Magic fans.
This is another guy that I look at and I'm like, I don't know that he's there at 18. I don't think he's there at 18. Just like a dude with that, with this good of just being a great shooter, being 6'8", being a great cutter. That's what this is what NBA teams would love. They want the guys that are gonna do the not so glamorous things, like just trying to cut to the basket, like something. Not a guy that necessarily needs the ball in his hands. He can shoot the ball really well. I don't think that he would be there. I would love, I think, Tristan da Silva in this instance, but just because of that, and we're just famished for a 3-point shooter. And another guy that's like Franz Wagner, I think we would like to clone Franz Wagner in a lot of instances. So I think that Tristan da Silva would be a lot of fun. Do you think with Tristan da Silva that there would be a path to minutes for him in year one, or in his case, in a lot of the cases of these prospects, would you say he's going to need some time, or that there's just not enough minutes to go around?
If you bring in Tristan da Silva, I think we don't ever see Caleb Houston again. Right? Like, I feel like they do enough of similar things, and Tristan is probably a bit better in a lot of those areas. Tristan's also older than Caleb Houston. Him being 23 years old, you hear this talked about a lot with drafts. Like, is it a red flag? Is it a good thing? Like, they're going to come in and they're more ready and they're more mature. But also, it's like, you're 23 years old. Like, there's not a ton of upside there, right? Like, you're going to get marginally better at the things that you're already good at. We know what this guy is going to be. We can maybe coach him up a bit defensively to be a bit better than he is. But this is going to be a guy who cuts off ball and knocks down 3-point shooting. And I don't mean to dismiss that at all. Those are two things that, of course, the Magic could use. But I don't see him coming in and like taking Jett Howard's minutes. I still feel like you took Jett Howard with the 11th pick of last year's draft. Still has a ton of upside. Cut his teeth in the G League last year. Like, he deserves a real look this year. To me, it would be crazy if you draft Tristan da Silva and then he's like your backup 3, like over a guy like Jett Howard. To me, that would be kind of crazy. I could see this draft going both ways, where a guy like Tristan da Silva ends up going in the lottery because teams know he's a safe pick. And I could also see teams going like, hey, this really isn't that strong of a draft anyway. Let's just take the home run frickin' swing. This isn't that great of a draft. People probably aren't going to kill us if this pick doesn't pan out. So I think there's a couple of other guys that we've talked about and we'll talk about in a few minutes that seem like more like a home run type of swing if you're betting on the upside. So maybe a guy like Tristan da Silva does fall. I think Jared McCain, like that vein where it's like a mix of, you know what you're getting. He's already really good at some things that are needed and maybe he can contribute right away. But there's also some upside stuff with Jared McCain that I don't necessarily see with Tristan da Silva. So I could talk myself into Tristan da Silva going in the lottery or potentially falling to 18. Or I could see, if the Magic, if he's there at like 16 and the Magic want to move up a couple of spots because this is their guy the entire draft, this is the guy that they want. I would not be surprised if the Magic find a way to end up with Tristan da Silva on draft night. All right, we're going to move through some of these other prospects here and now. Like I mentioned, all of these other guys were only mocked by one outlet. So next up is going to be Zach Edey, who was mocked by Hoops Hype. So Zach Edey, a lot of you are probably pretty familiar with him. He had a very decorated college career, one of the most decorated college basketball players of all time. The big man, 7'4", 300 pounds, 7'10" wingspan, 22 years old, the center out of Purdue. Zach Edey is your like traditional back to the basket big, just a dominant force at Purdue all 4 years, but especially this year on his route to win his second Naismith Player of the Year award. 25.2 points per game, 12.2 rebounds, 2 assists, 2.2 blocks per game, shot 62% from the floor, shot 62% from 2, was, I think, 1 of 2 from behind the arc this season. So there are obviously questions about, is he going to be able to develop into a shooter to really like get the most or squeeze the most out of that orange. But during the combine, the 3-point shooting drills, he shot 14 to 25 from behind the arc. And the thing about Edey as well is, as he gets double teamed in the post, can pass out of those reads and find the open man. Solid rim protector as long as you are like meeting him at the rim, but just does not have a lot of like lateral quickness. Is not a guy that's going to be positionally versatile. Isn't a guy that can switch on to like any type of quicker wings. Definitely not guards. He's just going to be feast upon in those types of matchups. And that is really like the biggest limiting factor for Zach Edey. Why you hear some mocks saying that he's going to go, in the 20s, maybe the late first round, and some other drafts saying that he's going to be like a top 10 overall pick. Like there's a pretty wide variance of where people think that Zach Edey falls in this draft.
With him, for me, and what I've seen of Zach Edey, as far as what analysts are saying and when they are evaluating his game, is to that point of he is going to get feasted on, like you said, in the pick and roll situation. This isn't college, right? Like this isn't, the NBA is so pick and roll heavy. Like that is there are so many pick and rolls that becomes part of the scheme for a lot of teams. Now imagine how much more the pick and roll will be used by an opposing team if Zach Edey's on the other end. Zach Edey, that pick would scare me. He's just too big, man. There's not a ton of, especially anymore, like a ton of guys who actually get run that are 7'3" and taller, right? And if they do, it's because they have the ability to just bust everyone's butt on the opposing end, Nikola Jokic, right? So for me, I find it hard that to believe that Edey is going to long-term carve himself out a role in the league, to be honest. But because a lot of times, like, college doesn't, just because you're a good college player doesn't mean that you translate to the NBA. It happens all the time. Carson Edwards, another one, right? A guy who was Naismith Player of the Year, went to Purdue, comes to the NBA, and I don't even know if he's in the league at this point. And it's not been that long since he was in college and was the star of the league. So just because you were a Player of the Year doesn't mean you're going to translate. And I just think that defensively, Zach Edey poses too many problems, especially for a Magic team that loves the ability to be versatile and to switch things and throw different looks at you and get it. We saw it, and I think it was Dan Savage the other day talk about one of the more overlooked things about Wendell Carter is the fact that he can move his feet on the perimeter. If put in a position, he's not going to get absolutely cooked every single time. Zach Edey on the perimeter definitely will. And I just think that schematically he does not fit with the Magic and what they're trying to do.
Speaking of like really good college players who their game doesn't necessarily translate to the NBA, shout out my guy Tyler Hansbrough, North Carolina legend, one of the greatest college basketball players of all time, especially in the Atlantic Coast Conference there. To his credit, I think Zach Edey's game is probably going to translate a little bit better than Tyler Hansbrough, just like given his size. Tyler Hansbrough was a phenomenal college basketball player. Led the Tar Heels to a national championship, all that kind of good stuff, and was just buns in the league because his game didn't really translate. I'm right there with you. Zach Edey pick would scare me a little bit just because, like, number one, it is polarizing. He's one of the greatest, college basketball players, especially in the last several years here. Nobody stays 4 years anymore. But the questions, I know we're going to get into this in a little bit later with one of the other prospects, but like, if this is your option, like, just bring back Goga, right? Like, if you're bringing Zach Edey in to be your third big man, just bring back Goga for me. And we'll save that because I know there's another prospect that we want to talk a little bit about as potentially a Goga replacement. Next guy up here on the list, mocked to the Magic by Bleacher Report. Out of Baylor, the 6'4" guard, 195 pounds, 6'10" wingspan, 19 years old, Jacoby Walter. This dude, the logic isn't exactly logicking based off of what I said when it comes to Johnny Furphy, and as we're talking about Caleb Houston, about this guy like theoretically being a shooter. This dude is just like a contested shot maker. Shot 34.1% this year on 6.3 attempts. But like, I don't know what it is about this kid's film, Luke. I don't see a world in where this dude, if he is able to like really carve out a role in the NBA, if he sticks, I don't see a world where this dude just like isn't one of those like J.R. Smith type of guys that like heats up, and all of a sudden you're like, how did this guy just hit 5 threes in the last 10 minutes? Like what is going on? Like, that skilled level of a shot maker with the hand in his face. Capable defensively as a playmaker, not great on the ball. Definitely right now, I think he's better in team concepts. But just in terms of like his anticipation, digging for steals, jumping in passing lanes, rotating over and helping on blocks. If he is beat, being able to time when the guy that he's guarding is going to make that attempt at the rim and getting there and be able to block that off of the backboard because he is a decent athlete, Luke. And the thing that also stood out to me, this kid, 14.5 points per game, right? 10 field goal attempts per game. 6 of those came from behind the arc. Dude still averaged 5 free throw attempts per game, primarily being known as a shooter. Like I mentioned, 14.5 points per game, 4.4 rebounds, 1.4 assists, 1.1 steals. shot 37% from the floor, 42% on twos, and 34% from behind the arc, but almost 80% at the free throw line. Luke, well, what were your takeaways from Jacoby Walter?
What was his, what did he measure at wingspan wise? Do you have that?
Jacoby Walter's wingspan was 6'10 from the draft combine.
Right. So he's like, he measured like 6'4". Yeah.
That's a Weltman boy.
That's a Weltman boy, if I've ever seen one. Just one that, like, let's see, I was looking at the Ringer as well, Kevin O'Connor stuff, and his attribute, which I love, that he has always, that he's been doing this at least in the last few years. The attribute that he gives him is that he's got that dog in him as well. And like you said, when you watch the film, it's like, how can this guy not be a guy that just asserts himself and fights for minutes and proves himself worth it for these NBA franchises to at least give him a chance? Anytime that you were just a max effort guy, you can defend. You've got a +6 wingspan as well to go along with it. It's like someone's going to give you a shot, obviously. And it does, like, the 37.6% from the field scares me, but he was a freshman. Who knows what really was going on, because I'm not someone that was sitting down to watch Baylor games. So I don't know if it was maybe a coaching thing, schematics, whatever it might be, but the attributes of what he did show flash-wise, he's someone that could definitely pan out and carve himself a role in the NBA.
Yeah, right now he doesn't have a lot in terms of like live ball creation stuff. I don't know that he'll ever be that type of guy. For me, if this were the pick, it would be like, we're giving you the Jet Howard treatment. Like, you're getting stashed in the G League. There's a lot of stuff that you need to work on, but he's not a elite athlete, but I think he has enough physical tools that this coaching staff and like the entire Magic system, whether that be Orlando or Osceola, I think could coach him up into being like a plus team defender. He probably never going to be like an elite guy defensively, but just given his tools and like some of the anticipation stuff that you see, I feel like he could be a net positive on that end. And if you can figure out how to get him some more effective looks from behind the arc, and he can be more efficient and be like a high 39% guy from behind the arc with the level of like difficult shot making that he already has, I could see that guy being a real guy in the league in the next several years here.
Yeah.
Okay, the next guy that we have here, who was mocked to the Magic by NBADraft.net, which NBADraft.net I'm always a little weary of. Maybe it's just like the aesthetic of their website. I don't know what does it for me, but regardless of that, KyShawn George out of Miami, 6'8 wing, 208 pounds, 6'10 wingspan. Another shooter, shot 40% from behind the arc this year, 43% on catch and shoot opportunities, and 54% on open catch and shoot opportunities. So you leave that dude open, and he is dropping it in from behind the arc. 7.6 points per game this year. Played in 31 games for Miami, but only started 16 of them. Shot 42% from the floor, 46.7% from two. Again, almost 41% from behind the arc and 77% from the free throw line. Added 3 rebounds, 2 assists, and almost a steal per game. Is a little bit of a limited athlete. Has some potential of as a defender, but this is a kid who that like primarily grew up as a point guard, and now has sort of transitioned into like a wing role with Miami. So you do see like there are some shades of playmaking, but still has like a long way to go. It's funny that you brought up Kevin O'Connor, because I was looking at the Ringer, and his comp for KyShawn George was shades of Joe Ingles. I don't know that I totally see that. Like I just see like Joe Ingles as much more of a controlled ball handler, and I think his playmaking chops are a bit more advanced than KyShawn George. For me, Luke, this would be another one of those types of guys that if we're drafting, like this is a project. This is a guy that you're going to be developing a little bit, and like even at 18, I feel like this would be a bit of like of an upside pick.
Definitely. I mean, this is a guy that if you bring him in, he's definitely getting put to the G League effective immediately, just because he is so young, and just the fact that he didn't play much with Miami. Like, he started 16 games, but he played like 23 minutes a game in 16 games. And I mean, shooting wise, it's maybe worth taking a shot, just because when it comes to shooting, he can definitely provide that. The 4 attempts a game, almost 41%. And I do think that his playmaking, from what I've seen and what I've watched, there's something to be said about the playmaking there. And just the fact that he didn't get as much shine as he should have or could have at Miami this past year. Over 2 assists. And for the role that he had at Miami, could argue like that you could see him being a 4.5, 5 assist guy in the NBA. So he's interesting to me. I'm not sold out on him by any means, but we'll see where he ends up. I think that and especially like the Ringer with Kevin O'Connor and a lot of other outlets, I feel like I saw him mocked lower than being at 18, like, but mainly like in the 20s, I feel like.
When it comes to the draft, like there are a lot of people that are fans of college basketball and draft and the whole evaluation process. People always like, no matter what guy it is in the draft, you're going to find a small camp of people that love this guy. Mm-hmm. And I haven't seen a ton of people that are really high on KyShawn George, but the ones that are high are really high on him. So I think there are things from every prospect that you could talk yourselves into that, hey, if the best version of this guy pans out, he'll be really good. I do feel like that with KyShawn George. Like if it pans out, this is a dude that people are going to look back on and be like, oh, I can't believe this guy fell this far. But he's got a long way to improve before he really gets to that level. And last but not least, this guy was mocked to the Magic by Yahoo Sports. Kel'el Ware, 6'11", 230 pounds, 7'4" wingspan, 19 years old, the big out of Indiana. A lob threat, absolutely lob threat. Obviously, good vertical leaper, good size, good hands around the rim. Offensive versatility. I think he's got some upside there. Just like he's got some post moves. There's a little bit of ball handling as well. Like you see some highlights of him going like end to end with the ball and having the ability to finish. And then he's got like jump hooks, a little bit, turnaround, fade away, jump shot, a little bit in his bag. Now, obviously, he's got to continue to improve and develop that kind of stuff. But like overall, good anticipation as a defender, and especially as a shot blocker. Could probably be a little bit better on that end. Even given his frame, 230 pounds at 7 foot, probably want to see him fill out a little bit more, Luke. But I know you're excited to talk about Kel'el Ware. Let me just throw some numbers out really quickly. Almost 16 points per game, almost 10 rebounds, shot 58% from the floor, 60% from 2, 42.5% from behind the arc, just 1.3 attempts, so relatively low volume, shot 63% from the free throw line, and added an assist and a half per game. Luke, what do you think of Kel'el?
I think that the redeeming factor of him, and not even redeeming, but like just the fact that he was able to shoot 42.5% on those 1 attempts a game. And by the way, in conference play in the Big Ten, he shot about the same 3-point attempts a game, 1.3, but shot 50%. So able, I think, is what you could maybe gather about Kel'el Ware. And I just love the fact that he is a lob threat. That's super exciting to me. You think of a guy like Derek Lively. That's what kind of some of the comps are with him. Just a great athlete, able to go up and get the ball, but also gives you the dimension of where Lively doesn't give you 3-point shooting at all. That Ware could be a guy that develops into a spacer on the floor as a big man, which is necessary a lot of the time with NBA teams now in this day and age is just spacing in general. But Ware is exciting to me just because I also think I'm going this route of like, this is who I want at 18 if the Magic were to use the pick. I'm going this route because I'm hoping that the Magic use free agency to get wings and guards and whatever they want there. And then if Goga does walk, because there is going to be a lot of interest, we've seen reports as of late about Goga drumming up interest as like a backup big for a lot of teams. They love what they saw, and rightfully so. When the lights were bright for the Magic on a win streak, whatever it might have been, Goga was able to step up and be very serviceable in that role. So if indeed Goga does go, then I would not mind taking a flyer on Ware and just putting him in like the third string center role on this team, maybe doesn't play a ton of minutes. Maybe you'd look at him playing like 10 minutes a game, 12 minutes a game, whatever it might be. But I just think that down the road, like, he's a great break glass in case, break in case of emergency. That's where I think that I would find him the first year or two. But I think he's awesome. I think he showed a lot of growth from what I've read and seen from Oregon to Indiana as well. For instance, at Oregon, that 1-3 a game was 27%, and in conference play, he was 1-3 a game at Oregon, 23.8% at Oregon, and then he goes to Indiana and showed a lot of improvement. I mean, he goes from it's a great. Obviously, you look back on it, you're like, wow, I'm sure he's glad he transferred. He was averaging 6.6 points per game at Oregon and 4 rebounds. Then he goes to Indiana and averages 16 and 10. That is obviously the other thing for me is like the ability to grab rebounds, 2 offensive rebounds a game, by the way. And then couple that with 9.9 total rebounds a game. I just think that he would be awesome to have, and the kind of upside, the flashes that he shows to be able to be a shooter in the league, he's super exciting to me in that respect. Like the most exciting that I could really get about a prospect at 18 for what I want the Magic to do, because like I said, what I want them to do with free agency is nothing to do with maybe a big man, but Goga, if he walks, I think he'd be a good replacement.
Yeah, I think there's still like a fair question just around the center position. I know there's the conversations around Wendell have sort of like flowed back and forth over the course of this last season. He gets injured. It's like, oh, look, he's injured again. Goga and Mo come in. It's like, oh, look how good they're playing. Do we really need Wendell? Wendell comes back and is sort of like up and down. And I think at this point is probably like a little bit underrated. But for me, I'm just keep coming back to the fact that you're going to need a failsafe for 20 to 25 games a year when it comes to Wendell. For that reason, if we were able to go out and get like an Isaiah Hartenstein, right? If you're able to upgrade at the center position, Wendell becomes your backup, or Mo becomes your backup. I don't know if you move Wendell. I don't know what that looks like, but if you're able to shore up the center position so that it's just like really, really solid, I would love that. I'd be a huge fan of a move like that. But there's sort of conflicting reports with Goga. It's like some teams see that he could be a backup. Other teams see that he might be able to be had for like the veteran minimum. If that's the case, if you can keep Goga for the veteran minimum or even give him a little bit of a raise over that just so that you keep him and he doesn't go elsewhere, I think you do that move, right? Like if you're not looking to really upgrade the center position this offseason, if you're okay with the current state of it, then just bring Goga back if he's relatively inexpensive. I think he's good for the culture. He's proven that he can step in big situations. Is he perfect? No, but like as it is now, I don't think Kel'el Ware would a guy like that would step in and just be better than Goga from day one. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Not that I don't like Kel'el Ware. Like if the Magic were to pick at 18 and Kel'el Ware is the pick, I think that's a pick that I could be excited about. I do see the upside. I think he is a guy that you probably have to be patient with and give him a couple of years. But I think you could do a lot worse, with the 18th pick. I feel like where I fall with this pick is whoever you take, like, don't expect them to contribute right away. Like, this is, right. I think why I would lean more towards the guys with upside, like a Jared McCain or like a Kel'el Ware. Because if you're patient with these guys and you can develop them, there are some guys that I think could be really good in 2 to 3 years from now in this area where we're able to select. So, Luke, what I wanted to ask you is, like, where are you with this pick? Do you want us to keep it, trade it, or stash?
I'll be honest. If it wasn't for this show, I would not have done any type of dive into prospects. Like, it just doesn't seem... It's not a priority for me as a fan of the Magic, right? And at pick 18, it's like, I hope that if they do pick someone, I hope they pan out. But also, it's not the end of the world. And it's a good position to be in, where we're not living and dying by draft anymore, which is awesome. And we're able to kind of we're very much able to look toward free agency. So for me, I'm not really invested in this draft. Because I am co-hosting a Magic podcast, that is the reason. We said, hey, we want to make sure that we obviously are covering the draft the way that the Magic fans deserve for, content to be looked at for everything, right? We have a high standard for whatever the event is. If the Magic are involved, we want to do some research to at least seem like we know what we're talking about. That's the reason, right? At the end of the day, I hope they trade it and just get future draft capital or package it with another player and trade for someone on draft night that they're looking at. I just want established players at this point. I want to see what Jet Howard and Anthony Black have, and let's move on from there.
Yeah, if they're able to somehow package this pick and get like a real asset out of it, I think that would be my number one priority. But if this pick just doesn't have a lot of value around the league and you can't find that package to make it make sense really for all parties, I'm totally okay with them taking a Kel'el Ware, or KyShawn or Jared McCain, one of these other guys, and just saying, hey, you're going to play in the G League, for this year, the way that Jet Howard did, and see the Magic continue to use that as sort of like a farm and developmental system.
Right.
I would be totally fine with that. Yeah. That's sort of where I'm at. I just don't see any of these guys in this range. The Magic drafting these guys and then contributing this year at least.
Right. Yeah, totally agree.
Okay, I think that's going to do it for this one. We're going to be recording Wednesday night after the draft. So if the Magic trade the pick, take the pick, whatever, we'll be here talking about it, breaking it down.
What time does the draft start?
I think it's at 8 o'clock. I think it's at 8 o'clock on Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken.
All right.
And then the second round is 4 p.m. on Thursday. So you all want to tune into that, you definitely can. But yeah, we'll be here to talk about the NBA draft and all things leading up to NBA free agency. And then obviously once free agency really gets going here, we'll be able to talk about that as well. But that is going to do it for this one. For Luke Sylvia, this has been Jonathan Osborne. You all have been listening to The Sixth Man Show, and we will catch you guys next time. See ya.
Thanks for listening to The Sixth Man Show. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes and Spotify to get new episodes downloaded directly to your phone. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to give us a 5-star rating and a review. It helps out the show a lot. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Sixth Man Show. We'll catch you guys next time. Go Magic!